Good evening, everybody. I think we will begin. Hi, welcome everyone to the Albright on this very chilly December evening. Welcome everyone on Zoom, joining us remotely as well. My name is Jamie Fraser. I'm the director here at the Albright. I normally introduce our speaker. Today, that's me. So what do you need to know about me? Not very much, really. I guess the main thing is that I arrived to become the director here at the Albright 2 years ago, October the 8th, 2023. I was coming via the British Museum where I was working previously, and I couldn't get a flight out on the October the 8th. So I managed to get in on October the 11th. I really like this picture of the Albright, and one of the reasons I like this picture of the Albright is you can see the snack shop opposite Yummy Corner. And our president of the Board of Trustees at the time, JP Dessel, and I were in close communication, given how uncertain the situation was at that point, and warnings from the embassy about, well, do we shut the Albright? Do we not shut the Albright? And JP said, is Yummy Corner still open? And I went, yeah, Yummy Corner's still open. He went, the moment Yummy Corner shuts, it's time to get out. And I think as an index goes, it's pretty spot on. Look, every November, I, as the director of the Albright, go to our Board of Trustees meeting, which always occurs with the ASOR conference somewhere in North America. Last November, it was in Boston. And what I do is I give a report to the Board of Trustees about how things have been at the Albright over the past year, what we've done well, where we need to focus on, what are our goals, what are our challenges. And that's exactly what I should be doing to our Board of Trustees, who take all of that very seriously. But the Albright, of course, is more than its Board of Trustees. It's everyone here in this room. It's everyone here on Zoom as well. So I think it's quite nice at the end of the year to kind of wrap up the year and celebrate what we've been able to do, highlight a few of the challenges that we've been facing, and explain, well, what are the goals over the next year? Because I know everyone in this room wants the best for the Albright, and part of that is me telling you what our vision is. So I think that's kind of the goal of this, or the reason why we're doing this. This year, of course, has been a tremendously difficult year for the Albright. In fact, it's hard pressed to think of a more difficult year recently. And on the one hand, it's been difficult, as it has been for every single person in this room and for every other international institute in Jerusalem, because, of course, very few of our fellows could come to the Albright, very few of our normal users for the hostel were able to get here. That means that a lot of our income was suppressed significantly, as it was last year and as it was through COVID. That has been a sustained financial bruising to us. But the problem is bigger than that, because, of course, we exist as a doorway. We exist for people to come here to this region from North America, from Europe, from across the world, to be in Jerusalem and to engage with local scholars, to engage with good research. And if people aren't coming out because of the situation, because their university insurance people might forbid them, then that just limits what we are able to do. So it's been a difficult year on that front. It's also been a difficult year, and this is our point of difference from the other international archaeological research institutes in Jerusalem, because we are an American research institute, and I'm sure everyone in this room knows just how significant, how drastic the funding landscape in North America has shifted in the last several months. I'll go into this a little bit, but that has led to all three of our US government grants being terminated, or the programs they're part of being terminated, which has a tremendously deleterious effect, not only on our finances, what we can do, but also on our ability to bring people here. So that's kind of the framework, the undercurrent that lurks beneath all the slides you're about to see. But let's not define ourselves by the problems that we face. Let's define ourselves by what we've been able to achieve, which has, I think, been considerable. First up, and I bang on about this at the beginning of every lecture, so you should all be able to do this by rote by now, this year is a tremendously significant year for the Albright. It's 100 years since the opening of our iconic building here in Jerusalem. So, bit of potted history. I'll throw a few dates at you. 1900, the school gets set up. It's the American School for Oriental Research in Jerusalem. 1909, we're able to buy this land that we're on. And in 1924, with some money donated by Jane Nyes, her husband, Reverend Nyes, we're able to construct this building. And then in September 2025, we opened this building. And having our own premises meant that we could really expand what we do. This year, we've been driving a centennial campaign to try and swell our endowment. And I'll go into this later on. Our endowment is the money that we have invested in the States, and the interest that we have off the endowment is one of our key streams of income. The stronger our endowment is, frankly, the stronger we can be. The stronger the endowment is, the more we can do our core business, what it is we do. We set ourselves a goal for the endowment of $3 million over the last couple of years. And we met that. And that's amazing. And in fact, we're narrowing in on $3.5 million. Now, that's not money that comes to me as the director that I can use to fix the heating and put in more smoke alarms and all of that sort of stuff. That's money we lock down in our endowment for our long-term future. It's the single most important thing we can do. We're not on 3.4 million. This webpage needs to be updated over the last few days. We're closing in on 3.5, but I would love to reach 3.5 by the end of the year. I really would. So if anyone's got any loose change in their jeans pockets, if anyone's sitting on a golden laying goose on Zoom, please let me know. And I'll return to this in the end. The key dates that you need to know, though, are these. On Sunday, June 28th, next year, we're holding our big centennial reception. This will be in the evening here in the Albright. You might have heard me previously say Saturday, June 27. Scrap that. Sunday, June 28. Dress up. This is a formal one. You can wear tuxedos if you like. However, suit, jacket, nice dress, as long as you come dressed, really, is fine. Monday, June 29 in the afternoon, that's when we'll have our annual July 4 Independence Day barbecue. We'll do it a week early so that everyone who's flying in for the centennial can join for that as well. Dress down for that one. But again, you must be dressed, but honestly, standards are fairly low on that one. Standards are fairly high on the Sunday. Lock that out in your calendar. This is a big event for the Albright, 100 brackets, 100 plus one. And of course, the reason why we postponed it from last year was that June, well, you all know what was going on in June with Bibi and the Ayatollah. The core business for the Albright is our Fellows program. What the Albright does is we support a group of fellows up until this year, that's 12 to 14 every year, to come to the Albright mostly for around 4 months, some for around 6 months, a couple just for 1 month, either in a spring semester or a fall semester. This is a competition. They apply. Our fellowships committee selects the best fellowship applications, particularly those who demonstrate a good need to be in Jerusalem, to pursue their research, to engage with local scholars. They get a room in our guest house, in our hostel. They get a desk in the library, and I expect them to be staple gunned to that desk, using the time away from university admin, from teaching responsibilities, from having to make food for your family, to just pump out some good research, to make the local connections. So our Spring Fellows program consisted of, I'm going to have to put my old man glasses on. So our Cy Gittin professor was Kathleen Nicole from the University of Utah. She was writing a biography of an early geologist, Eleanor Wright Gardner. Roy Marom, who's not in this photograph, who sort of lagged on from the previous year, was looking at rural populations in Ottoman Palestine. Michael Hazel, our NEH professor from Southern Adventist University, was publishing the fourth expedition to Lachish. Our junior scholars, David Brown from UCLA, was researching refugees in the early Iron Age archaeological record. Alexander Dorr on archaeozoology and agricultural economy at Hellenistic Tel Shimron. And our Barton Borovsky was Christian Schoner from the University of Cologne, looking at excavations and the survey around the city of Alusa down in the Negev. Also shown in that photo is Timothy Saylors from the University of Tübingen, who was here as a junior fellow researching the early Christian book. And we also had Eric Klein as a Fulbright professor who was here, staying briefly in the spring. And Eric, of course, was not only here as a Fulbright professor, but he, at the beginning of the year, became our president of the Board of Trustees. So he was here to see how the sausage is made at the Albright as much as to do his research. And while I've got that picture of Eric, I'm going to show you this photograph, which I think is a very important photograph. When we had Cy Gitton and his wife Sherry, Bill Deaver, who was visiting, and his wife Pam, and myself as three directors and ex-directors of the Albright, and Eric as a president of the Board of Trustees, all together, which I think is a really lovely photograph that happened in the spring. While the fellows are here, the Albright puts on an academic program. This is a program of lectures. You're in it right now, of workshops, of seminars, of site visits. And this is a list of some of the lectures that we held in the spring. We had 8 in total. There's Timothy Saylors, who was traveling when that first photograph was taken. But all the fellows gave a lecture on their research, as they are expected to do. And any visiting academics that come, we snaffle for lectures as well as local academics. On April the 28th, Professor Felix Hofmeier and his colleagues from the Austrian Academy of Sciences gave a lecture about the history of Tel Balata Shechem. Remember that one, because we'll come back to it shortly. And the spring field trip program was robust. We did several field trips, including to the Hebrew U excavations at Tel Beit Mersim, to St. Anne's Church and the museum. All of these are guided by the excavators or by local workers. So at St. Anne's Church, for example, Father Christoph, who had set up and opened their new museum. If you have not seen that, go and see it. It is wonderful. Gave a tour of that. The Ein Gedi excavations, the Islamic Art Museum. Michael Hazel toured the Khirbet and Tel Lachish for us, and Shua Kasilovic, our new assistant director, and we'll get on to Shua in a little bit, organised a superb tour of the new IIA facilities in West Jerusalem, including the Dead Sea Scrolls lab, which was really amazingly special. When the fellows are here 6 nights a week, they are expected, most nights, to sit down and have dinner together. We have a chef. In fact, we've got 2 chefs who work in the kitchen. Hisham, of course, is still stuck in the West Bank and can't come in, but Chef Ahmed has been in, and sometimes Hisham's son Dawood has been helping out. Part of this is to invite local scholars to come and have a meal with the fellows. And we will ask the fellows if there's anyone in particular they would like to meet. For junior fellows, this is a great opportunity to meet with senior researchers here in Jerusalem, people who might mark their thesis, people who might be writing them references, people who might be sitting on job panels down the line, people who might just have a really interesting idea that they want to use as a soundboard. You can see from this list of dinners, this is not just the spring, this is all year from those that I remember. It's certainly not exhaustive. It's local scholars, local NGOs, embassy staff, a variety of people. Mahmoud Muna from the Educational Bookshop down the road. And it's that kitchen table, that dining room table, when I take people around a tour of the Albright, I describe it as a kind of magical piece of furniture. It's the most important thing I think the Albright owns, because you bring people put them around a table, feed them well, and do that 6 nights a week for 4 months, they leave as friends, regardless of background, of all sorts of differences. It is manifest the Albright's mission to be a hub that brings scholars together to promote research excellence. And that is built into the grain of that wood, of that kitchen table. Now, that was the spring semester. We all know what happened over the summer. I won't dwell on it. And I have got a fabulous picture of us hustled down in the library basement during one of the sirens, where I had a very fine bottle of single malt squirreled away. One must keep their spirits up. And I took it off at the last minute because I'm not sure Eric Klein wants his students to see him drink that much scotch during the sirens. However, one must do what one needs to do. The events of the summer did have a knock-on effect for us into our fall program, because a lot of the fellows who were supposed to come in the fall either cancelled or postponed to spring next year. And really, it's only been this last month where the numbers of our fellows have picked up. This, by the way, is a staff photograph that was taken about 3 hours ago. It was done, there is a professional one done by a professional photographer, but for this lecture tonight, I jumped down and grabbed it with my mobile phone. At some point, the nice one will appear on the website. But our fall fellows include Kristen de Troyer, our Seymour Gittin Distinguished Professor, University of Salzburg, tracing anti-Jewish initiatives and arguments and responses to them. Our for Rijks Fellow, Maurits Adam, University of Zurich, looking at concepts of time, transformation say it for me, Maurits, I can't say that word. Apocalyptic literature. NEH Fellow Sonia Najjar, looking at transforming East Jerusalem, civic society, sacred law, structures of meaning. Shulamit Miller from Hebrew University, looking at her excavations and legacy excavations at Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee, the early Islamic periods in particular. Sophia Avance, looking at Sepphoris, in particular ritual purity practices. And Simon Walsh from the University of Cambridge, who has got his PhD surrounded and is on the last leg, I understand, on scribal presentation of the War Scroll. I have promised Simon that if he finishes and submits while he is at the Albright, we shall host a party the likes that Jerusalem has never seen before. Our lecture series through the fall semester has been fulsome as well. So we had 8 in the first, 10 in the second. Nadia Ben Marzouk, who started, was supposed to come out. She's one of the ones that postponed, but was able to do a superb lecture across Zoom. I want to point out a couple. We've got Shua, if you notice on the September the 10th, Shua, as our new assistant director, gave a lecture, but this is part of a new initiative that we've done with ASOR, the American School of Research. ASOR and the Albright, of course, are completely different entities. ASOR started as the Albright, as the American School of Oriental Research in Jerusalem, but in 1970 became its own thing in America, and we became our own thing here in Jerusalem and renamed ourselves the Albright Institute. There's a lot of confusion about this in Jerusalem, I find. There's no governance relationship, there's no financial relationship. The only relationship that exists between us and ASOR is a historical one, but it's a very valuable one. It's one that we take very seriously. And part of this is that 2 lectures each semester we host now in collaboration with the Friends of ASOR. And you may have already noticed that does mean we have to hold those ones a little later so that California can log in as well. But it's a lovely initiative to do. And I also point out we managed to launch 2 books as well. Susan Weingarten, one of our annual associate fellows, on what's cooking in the Talmuds, and Rodney Yates from St. George's College, on pilgrimage in Jerusalem before the Crusades. I love book launches. It's exactly the sort of thing the Albright should be celebrating. Completion, publication, dissemination of excellent research. Now, because we had fewer fellows over most of this semester, through the fall, we did fewer field trips, but we did more robust field trips, more ambitious field trips, if you like. Shua organised an overnight trip to see excavations in the north, Tel Shadud, Abel Beth Macha, Tel Haksor, of course. And we even did a 3-day trip across to Jordan, primarily to visit the German Protestant Institute's excavations at Tel Zira in the north. We also saw a bunch of other sites, Case, Jerash, the Iman Citadel, and Pella and Khirbet Ghozlan, where I've cut my own archaeological teeth. The photograph at the top, by the way, is of some of the fellows and the associate fellows at ACOR. ACOR is our sister institute in Amman, the American Center of Research, which is where we based ourselves. What I've described is the very formal side to our academic program. Now, let me scythe the boil that is the legacy of the beer fridge. Many years ago, the Albright had a fridge that was full of beer and that was free for people to drink. It was a wonderful thing if we have the money to do it. It also became the thing that the Albright was known for. And I think the Albright can be known for better things than free beer. So my predecessor, Katharina Schmidt, got rid of the beer fridge. I wholly endorsed that move. But what we do is a Thursday session of drinks, particularly during daylight saving. The Albright provides the drinks in the courtyard. And that is for our fellows, our associate fellows, invited guests from the other institutes, from the IAA, from all around, as a very convivial, informal way to build our community and to meet other local compatriots. Now, under Katharina's time, it was called Sundowners. And this was fine for me, being a member of the British Empire. I thought Sundowners is exactly what you do. You have a drink of a gin and tonic as the sun goes down at the Raffles Hotel in Singapore. Apparently, to North Americans, Sundowners means the last hour of lucidity you get in a nursing home as the elderly gradually check out for the night, which might have been quite an apposite name. However, Eric Klein, when he couldn't get the name Sundowner out once, maybe he was sundowning, I don't know, called it by mistake Thunder Hour, and we all decided that Thunder Hour was a far better name for the Thursday afternoon drinks, and Thunder Hour it is now thus. We don't do it during the winter, it's too cold outside, but we have other kind of pop-up events like that. So that has been our academic program. I start with our academic program because our academic program is who we are. It is the most important thing about what the Albright is, what we achieve, why we're here. There have been a lot of other changes through this last year. Now, December 2024, at the end of the year, Michael Johnson, our assistant director, and his wife, Emily Johnson, who is head librarian, left to return to Canada. Emily got a fantastic job as librarian in a local college near where her parents live, and it was a wonderful opportunity for them both. Michael, by the way, still continues to work on a contract basis, a casual basis, as our kind of computer technician. He's behind the Zoom call right now and can hear me talking about him, so I have to be careful what I say. We miss Michael and Emily a lot. They were a wonderful presence here. However, we are able to celebrate new additions to the staff. And of course, the new assistant director, not so new now, she's been here over 6 months, is Shua Kasilovic, who I'm sure everyone would agree has come in all guns blazing and made an incredible mark at the Institute over these last few months. We're extremely lucky to have her. And Ruba Schwakey, Ruba, can you just wave? Started not so long ago as our head librarian. Now, because of those financial issues that I alluded to at the beginning, we were only able to employ Ruba for 3 days a week. However, the job is a full-time one that we've split with the Kenyan Institute, the British Institute up the road. So Ruba works here 3 days a week and at the Kenyon 2 days a week. I won't ask her which one she prefers because that would be unfair. However, I'll just assume the answer. And our finance manager around about September, Nadia Bandak, retired after almost 32 years. That's 32 years of Nadia living in Bethlehem, crossing the crossing point every day, coming in, doing an extraordinary job. She really loved and served the Institute well. And Nadia said she was going to try and join Zoom. I don't know if she has or not, but can I ask you all just to give Nadia a round of applause? Because she was an amazing service to the Albright. However, Nadia has been now succeeded by Russia Shamir. Russia has come in as our new finance manager or comptroller. Russia has already hit the ground running. She's done an extraordinary job. It's a very difficult role, this one, compounded by the fact that for 30 years, once a week, Nadia would walk down Salahuddin Street to Mercantile Bank to do the banking. In her first month, Russia did this, was hit by a taxi very badly, and is still in bed. A miracle that nothing was broken, but we wish Russia well and look forward to her being back here, hopefully in the new year. An incredibly unlucky thing to have happened to her, and yet incredibly lucky that she was able to, well, eventually walk away from such a horrific accident. Now, I'm not quite sure where to put the next slide, but there is one more addition to the staff. Now, do you remember I said, don't forget Felix Holfmeyer from the Austrian Academy of Sciences, who came out on April the 28th? I was sitting in my office on that day and could hear a yowling like hell was burning down. And I went out to the front to see what was going on. And this tiny little kitten had got his back paw crushed by our vehicle gate when it was opening. And as I picked him up, and I'm a dog person, as I picked him up, Herr Professor Dr. Felix Hofmeier of the Austrian Academy of Sciences walked through the gate and said, "Hello, Jamie, I'm Felix. I'm here to do the lecture tonight." And I went, "Felix, this is my cat, Felix." And that is his name. You can see here, Felix has made friends. If I couldn't find him tonight when we were preparing for the lecture, and I wanted to find him to put him in my apartment before the gate was open. Couldn't find him anywhere. Moritz came down with him. He'd been hanging out in Moritz's room in the hostel for the last wee while. So whether we like it or not, we do have that addition as well. One of the jewels in the crown of the Albright programs is our Artist in Residence program. Now, this is sponsored by Jerusalem Culture Unlimited. JCU are an Israeli-based NGO, and they are very concerned about giving opportunities for young artists, particularly artists from Jerusalem, and particularly artists from East Jerusalem. So they sponsor 2 artists every year to stay in the Albright for 2 months each, to have some studio space and to work on a project. Now, when they're selected, it's done very deliberately so that they get artists who would likely draw inspiration from being in this research environment. And one of the artists in residence 2 rounds ago, a guy called Sami Koch, was researching Arabic calligraphy, and he was blending it with ancient cuneiform. Now, I remember going out into the courtyard, and our NEH fellow, Nadia Ben Mazouk, who looks at cuneiform on seals and ceilings, and Sami were in deep conversation, and I came out about 3 hours later, and they were still there in deep conversation. That conversation, which you can't schedule on a Zoom call, tremendously influenced the way Sami then approached cuneiform script and how he understood it and incorporated it into his artwork. And Nadia said she studied cuneiform, the syntax, the structure, all of that, but she never really considered it aesthetically before. So to look at it from each other's eyes kind of is a wonderful case study for why this Artist in Residence program, I think, is such a special thing for the Albright that gives us breadth and that gives us depth. One of our associate fellows, who I won't say, when he heard about our financial problems with the cut grant, said, well, you should probably get rid of the artists in residence program. And I said, well, for a start, that brings us money, but it brings us so much more. And I think it's a real wonderful thing. Our two artists in residence this year were Aboud and Chardin, and they gave a presentation of their projects, what they did while they were at the Albright in this room only a couple of weeks ago. And then we had a big dinner for them here, and it was really a wonderful and very special event. Those artists in residence programs were actually featured in a special exhibition at the YMCA earlier this year in May. You can see with the Albright as part of that, which gave us wonderful kind of visibility beyond our normal visibility within the city. And right now there is another exhibition that's just opened at the YMCA that it features several of these artists in residence and some of the works they were working on while they were here at the Albright. It's a wonderful exhibition. I encourage you to see it. Beyond our academic programs, of course, the Albright has a wide range of public events. Sounding Jerusalem is perhaps draws in the largest crowd. This happens every summer, where a group of musicians come in from Austria and other places. We host it in the courtyard, and it's really a lovely, wonderful event that brings a wide cross-section of people to the Albright we don't normally see. And of course, every November we have our Thanksgiving lunch for our fellows, our associate fellows, and some of our other colleagues around the city. I point out, of course, that in the staff photo on the bottom, Hisham is missing because he was stuck in Abu Dhabi and couldn't get in, but he'd done a lot of the cooking for this in his home kitchen that then was brought over with Ashraf, our facilities manager, in the Albright vehicle, as he does for a lot of these suppers after these events, including the one we're about to have tonight. So even though he's not on the photograph, Hisham is very dearly missed. I would want to share one other photograph with you from Thanksgiving, because I think this is a very important photograph, because what you're seeing here is not only myself and Shua from the Albright Institute, but Josef Briffer from the PBI, who's here this evening, representatives from the École Biblique, from the IAA, from the German Protestant Institute, from the Swedish Theological Institute, from the Kenyan Institute and CBRL, from St. George's College. These are all the directors, the heads of the various foreign institutes around the city. And I can't think of a time when we've seen everyone together in one photograph. It shows why these events are really important. It's convivial. It's wonderful to celebrate Thanksgiving, but we're stronger together, and we're only stronger together when we come together. And events like Thanksgiving at the Albright are one of those rare avenues to do that. We have undergone some capital works. Some of this has been foisted upon us. The bathroom of room 12, the only bathroom not to have been renovated over COVID, sprang a leak in the walls. So we had to do that, and we had to do that reasonably fast. So you can see a before and after photograph. I'll spare you with the budget headaches that causes. One that I wanted to do was to just refurbish our foyer. I don't know if you remember the foyer. It looked a little tired, these kind of very steep, narrow walls. We had some very distressed kind of furniture in there. One of the things we did was able to get Studio Chalet, a studio who are expert in the kind of mosaic frescoes of Jerusalem, in, and using the one in the library as an inspiration, which is 100 years old, to replicate it around the foyer, which I think you'll agree really anchors it and gives it a sense of style and a tone. And that's the first time people enter the Albright. So that tone is important. And you can see Ashraf made a desk that you can see there. That's actually one of the Albright classic dark green window shutters as a tabletop, which is very apropos. And then we've got a sign, a very large sign that's going to go on the wall. It's just in production at the moment, explaining who we are, what our mission is, a bit about our history, what our logo looks like, what it means, so that when people come into the Albright, they know instantly who we are, what we're about. Also, from another small sign, how to support us if they feel so inclined. The green room is the room next door to where we're sitting now. This was refurbishment that we didn't do. A few months ago, an Israeli television company hired part of the campus to shoot. We actually had two, one doing a film called in Hebrew, but I'm not sure the Hebrew, but in English, Lady Boss Driver, about an Orthodox woman who has to get work and she ends up driving a truck for a theatre company. Watch for that. A lot of that's done in the courtyard. And then a children's show about two kids that solve mysteries, and they needed outdoor shots, but also indoor shots. And so they turned our supper reception room into a kind of stately home. And they said, can we repaint? And we went, sure, as long as you paint it back. So they repainted it this wonderful dark green. And we went, hang on, this looks amazing. And then Shua and Ashraf, with a bit of searching around, found the portrait of Jane Nyes. Remember the person who funded the building 100 years ago? And you can't see it in this photo, but you can see it straight through there, the Reverend Nyes, which I think is very fitting that they go on the wall, particularly for our centennial year. And it really is a lovely space. You can see this was set up for, I think this was Thanksgiving or the JCU dinner. It's a wonderful kind of sense of occasion in that room. In terms of our collections, the Albright has our library collections. We haven't acquired anything for the library in terms of purchases for a few years now because of the constraints with funding. That's a big concern and something that I'm hoping to arrest and change in the coming several months. But one of the things that we have done is acquired an extraordinarily generous donation of satellite images from John K. Hall. These were captured by the Geological Survey of Israel. John K. Hall is a very good colleague of Shua's, which is how this came to us. They are extraordinary high-resolution satellite maps of the entire region. You can see tell sites on this. So for landscape projects, they are an incredible resource, and they're now in the library for anyone to use. Now, there's been one other loan, which is, you might see this picture here, and there's one other picture that's in my office, that the treasurer of our Board of Trustees, Nat Levto, who was staying in Jerusalem for several months early this year, when he left, he loaned these as long-term loans to the Albright. I'm not going to tell you about them, because when Nat loaned them on long-term loan to the Albright, Nitai King asked if he could perhaps do a research project on particularly this one, work out what it was, how old it was, where it was taken from. Now, Nitai is in 8th grade. He is the youngest member of our community. He's sitting here right now. Nitai comes to a lot of our lectures. He's been coming to many of our lectures over the last year. He asks intelligent questions. We've got, and on that same row, we have Nitai. How old are you, Nitai? 13? 13. And 3 people up, we have Dr. Iskander Najjar, the old provost at Al-Quds University, who is 90. So I think we have the bookended range of people who engage with the Albright. I've asked Nitai if he can present his research to us. So Nitai, can I invite you to continue? Is that okay? With Nitai is his father, Alexander.
Yeah, go for it. Hold him close.
This one moment. Just careful to step on this. Step on that against next. There we go. Okay, let's try that.
This is the story of a photograph of the old city taken from the south, which I first saw this summer at the home of Albright fellow Nat Leftov. Nat purchased the picture in March this year from Elia Kavadjian of Elia Photo Service in the Old City, which was established by Elia's grandfather, also named Elia, who took many famous photographs during the British Mandate. Elia Sr. is seen here with his son Kivuk. Together with a picture of a sailboat, the picture was donated by Nat to the Albright. To find out more about the picture, my father and I visited Elia's shop. We discovered this photograph and noticed that Nat's picture was in fact a small part of this larger picture. We acquired the print and then began investigating its provenance. Elliot told us that the photograph was not taken by his grandfather, but by either Eric Matson or Louis Lawson in 1934, and was part of the Matson collection in the U.S. Library of Congress. According to Elia, the picture was taken from Mason Abram in Ras El Amud. However, all the photographs taken from there shows the southeast corner of the old city at an obtuse angle, whereas in our picture, it's shown at an acute angle. So that viewpoint was too far to the east. It was then suggested to us that the picture was taken from a Surrey, but the view from there has the old city blocked by Mount Zion, so that viewpoint was too far to the west. Eventually, we found the picture in the Library of Congress website. It was described there as being taken from Government House. I checked this location by identifying various landmarks in the picture, and which I marked on a map, and then using triangulation, I confirmed that the photo was indeed taken from Government House, as shown in this clip. We would like to thank Jamie and the Albright for a fascinating year of lectures, and I want to present this print of the original photograph to the Albright.
Oh, Nitai, thank you. Brain needs to put on our wall. That was a wonderful piece of research. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming to our lecture.
Thank you very much.
I remember the very first time I gave a public presentation on a bit of research. I was a lot older than Nitai and a lot more nervous. You are a natural, my friend. You will go far. That was a wonderful bit of research. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and thank you for being part of our community. It's wonderful that we have such a variety of people who come in here. You are always very welcome. Now, I've spoken about this briefly, so for some of you might know about this. This is one of the other recent acquisitions to our collection. This is the Albright Family Archive. Came in November last year, so we're a little bit over the year, but I'm going to talk about it anyway for reasons that'll become obvious. In 2024, midway through, I was emailed by Abigail Feldman. Abigail is the daughter of Nancy Schufenthal, the Albright, who is the daughter of Paul Norton Albright, who was the eldest son of William Foxwell Albright and his wife Ruth. Abigail said that her mother, Nancy, was going to be moved into a home. She was tidying up all the effects, and she said there was a wonderful collection of letters, postcards, pictures that Albright had sent to his mother for a large part of his career, including twice a week for his time as director of the Albright Institute, or then the American School here in Jerusalem. Would the Albright be interested in having them? I typed so fast my fingers smoked as I answered in the affirmative. In November last year, I was fortunate enough to visit Abigail and her mother, Nancy, and take, on behalf of the Albright, this extraordinary archive. It's not huge, but it's significant. In fact, it's very significant. Neither of the biographers of Albright, I think, have gone through this archive, certainly not in any detail. What it contains is photographs and photographic negatives, including of the construction of the building, photographs that I've never seen of the construction of the building, the measuring up of the courtyard, the planting of the trees that now stand outside 100 years old, one of them leaning dangerously over the roof, but that's another issue. The construction of the fountain. A whole range of random stuff. If anyone can explain that one on the right, I would love to know. I think it's actually something about John the Baptist, but I don't know. At least that's what I hope. The first visit to Tel Beit Mersim, first visit. And already the excavators from Hebrew U, Igor Kramerman and Mike Freakman, have been delving into this archive, trying to find more about the early beginnings of that very important excavation, for which the pottery type series sits in that chest just over there. We've got one of the first images of the Palmyra bust, which sits in the Albright's collection. And you can see, I'm sorry for the people at Zoom to walk away, but on the side of the room, you can see it on display. That must be taken in 1914 because the bust was acquired in 1914. The Institute purchased it off the dragoman called Yakub Kuri, who was the dragoman to the Imperial Russian Embassy, who had been up digging in Palmyra. And at the time, the Institute was based in Ethiopia Street, very close to the Swedish Theological Institute. And I think I know where this place is and I want to go and check it out. But of course, in World War I, the Albright or the American school actually shut its doors for a few years. So it has to be there in 1914, a very nice bit of sort of provenance stamp, which of course is always very important for demonstrating provenance and demonstrating ownership of cultural property. That bust, by the way, we've loaned to the Israel Museum, where it's on display now. It was on display in a special exhibition called Women of Valor, and now it sits as a gateway object into their gallery called Neighbouring Cultures. So if you want to go and see it now. More people have seen it in the last 6 months than in the last 100 years. By the way, one of the earlier directors, who shall remain nameless, but who wasn't Cy Gittin, and you've seen a photograph of him in this presentation, thought this was a fake and actually put a label up it was a fake. It's not a fake at all. It is a very good, in fact, it's a very high quality piece. And at the British Museum, when I was curator of the Levant, I used to curate their Palmyran collection of about 35 busts. So I'm very impressed by just how secure this is. But perhaps the best thing about this archive is the letters that Albright wrote to his mother from Baltimore, then from Jerusalem, and he wrote prolifically and he wrote well. This is just an excerpt from one dealing with Nyes before this bequest to build the building. Wednesday afternoon and evening was the guest of Dr. Nyes for 8 hours in his apartment. In him I have a warm friend and backer, a most charming old gentleman who always predicts a brilliant Orientalistic career for me and will supply me with funds if I run short. His wife, the person we saw the portrait of, left $50,000 to the school in Jerusalem. Letter from Albright to his mother in November 1919. There are dozens, hundreds of gems about the history of the Institute, about the development of archaeology as a discipline here in Jerusalem, and really about the American experience of the Holy Land in the first half of the 20th century in this extraordinary archive. I'm going to share one more letter from Albright with you, but I'm going to do that at the very end. So we'll come back to that. Right. So that's kind of what we've been doing. Here are some of the challenges we've been facing at the same time. The Albright has a very simple budget, really, in that we get about a third of our income off the hostel, what we generate from people staying here. We get a third of our income off US government grants, and we get a third of our income from our endowment. That is the interest that the endowment spits off that we then use for our operating costs. Now, for the last couple of years since October 7, and in fact through COVID before that, the income from our hostel has been very suppressed. Now, bookings for our hostel from the 1st of January next year to the 30th of June next year, currently, as bookings are at 75% already. That's wonderful, because it says that people are coming back to do what they want to do and what they need to do. It won't take much in the geopolitical climate for those to evaporate, as they did before, again and again. But right now, what has been suppressed looks like it's going to rebound. And in addition to the financial money that we get for that, of course, that is the very bread and butter of who we do. It's our mission to have people here. We had got a third of our income off US government grants. These fell into 3 grants: a Title VI grant from the Department of Education, a National Endowment of the Humanities grant, and a grant called the Education and Culture Awards via CAOC, a kind of umbrella organisation for us. Those grants supported fellowships. They also supported operational costs. We've been struggling badly with the suppressed third income from the hostel. Within a matter of months, we lost all of our US grants in one go, which left our endowment as our single, only reliable stream of income. That's why this centennial campaign is critical for us. That's why if we want to be here in another 100 years, we have to make that slice of the pie chart as big as we possibly can. This is what our fellowship scheme looked like right up until this year, where we would offer 12 to 14 fellowships every year, some of them funded by the US government, some of them funded by our endowment. This is what is left now. We've gone from 12 to 14 every year to 6 because of the cancellations of the US government. And we've got a joint fellowship with the Palestine Exploration Fund in London, which they've temporarily suspended, or at least we hope temporarily, because of insurance issues of people coming to Jerusalem. I hope that will come back at some point. In terms of our funding, the money that we get for hosting people here, that's a problem. But the bigger problem is, it strikes at the very heart of our reason to be, our raison d'etre. The Fellows program is our core. It's our essence. It's why we're here. So to lose so many fellows, so many fellowships so quickly is of significant concern. What's more, 4 of the fellowships that we had were for junior researchers. 1, the Myers for a PhD fellowship, and 3 ECA junior ones for PhDs or early career, particularly for those critical years, those critical 2-3 years after someone submitted a PhD, but where it's really hard to get a start. That was a tremendously significant thing. We've gone from 4 to 1. We've lost 3/4 of our junior fellows. That worries me significantly. Now, we spoke about this as a board of trustees in November in our meeting, and we're coming up with some ideas on how to ameliorate this. But one of the things that we have to investigate, I think, is like the PEF, institution to institution fellowships. So if you're based at an institution that perhaps might want to have a fellowship held in Jerusalem at the Albright just for your students, then we can talk, because I'm very keen to build our fellowships program back quickly and strongly in the best way we can. And we've got to be robust about this. So that's the concerning news. That's what keeps me up at night. And that's what keeps me rejigging our budget again and again and again. Some good news. At the end of September, we were awarded a $1.6 million grant by the US Department of State and by the US Embassy. This is the beginning of a much longer press release. You don't need to read the words really. But this is a tremendously significant thing for the Albright. What it doesn't do is replenish our fellowships. The money is restricted, it has strings, and it must be spent certain ways. There's 3 main projects. The first project, and the lion's share, is to do heritage work. It is to do small-scale excavation, site preservation and conservation, and this came at the directive of the US Department of State, of Judeo-Christian heritage in the Galilee, particularly a synagogue and an early church. And so we're partnering with local stakeholders on the ground, including the IAA, to help assist with plans already in place to conserve, to do some small ongoing excavations, to conserve and preserve the synagogue at Hakuk. And of course, Jody Magnus, who's on our board of trustees, dug at that site, and she comes on board as an archaeological consultant for this part of the project. And in addition, we're also partnering with local stakeholders to help conserve, preserve the Bethsaida Church, the El Araj Church, also up in the Galilee. The lion's share of that money goes out for this on-site conservation work, but part of it is to build in for 2 years, this is a 24-month grant, a project manager. And that project manager is there to make sure these funds are being spent in the way the US State Department wants, to coordinate the project, to tie all the different stakeholders together so that we're moving in the same way. Now, Shua Kasilovic, of course, our assistant director, has come via the Hakuk project, knows it, and of course has come via the IAA, knows the IAA better than anyone. So Shua steps into that project manager's role for the next 24 months on secondment from her permanent role as assistant director here at the Albright. Now, Sarit has stepped in to take that role of assistant director for the 24 months. However, I think the commute, perhaps Sarit lives in Tel Aviv, has been a little too grueling, and Sarit, unfortunately, is going to have to step back from that role, which means in the new year, I will be looking for someone to step in on a temporary 24-month or by then 20-month basis to fill in as our assistant director for the next better part of 2 years. So if you know anyone who would be interested in that, I'd be interested in hearing from them. That's project one. I said there were 3 projects in this grant. The second project, now remember the Albright Family Archive? I had a conservator, Alejandra Sanchez, come and do a conservation assessment of this archive so that I had a document ready to go that I could go to donors with and say, can you donate a large amount of money to help us conserve, preserve, digitize, transcribe, upload this archive for researchers everywhere. That project was ready and Alejandra had done the conservation assessment for that. And then this grant came along. And I said, well, this would be a wonderful thing to include in this grant. And the embassy were very on board with this too. And so part of that money is to employ Alejandra for 2 years to go and not just deal with the Albright Family Archive, but to conserve all of our archaeological collections, all of our rare books, archival collections, digitize, transcribe, upload. This is a watershed moment for how the Albright looks after its collections and its archives. And by the end of the 2 years, Alejandra will have all of that Albright Family Archive on our website for anyone to use. And I think that's pretty special. It's also a really amazing resource for American researchers understanding the American contribution to archaeology in this part of the world. And the third thing I said, the third project is part of this grant is to go towards the centennial celebrations. Now remember, next year, you might have seen this in the American media, is America 250, 250 years since American independence. So our Albright 100-year celebration marries with the America 250-year celebration so that when we have these events, we're very much in lockstep. And part of the funding to host these events is now being provided by the US Department of State and by the US Embassy, which means, I hope, that we will be able to be fairly ambitious with what we do. By the way, why I've got this webpage up, if you go onto our webpage, aiar.org, you will see two tabs up there. The one on the right is our email list. If you are not on our email list and want to be on our email list to hear about our events, please go on there and sign up. We would love to hear from you. But if you would like to give to the Albright as part of this centennial drive, this is the portal through which you can do it, through the Centennial tab. And there are a number of different ways you can do this. For $250, you can purchase a named paving slab. This is a very early iteration of Ashraf putting down the first batch of named slabs. You can do that for yourself, for a loved one. There's one there for Bojangles. I suspect that's somebody's dog. I don't know. We've got various foreign institutes represented there. The ACOR in Jordan, the Swedish Theological Institute, any of the other foreign institutes in the room, cough, cough, perhaps you might want to consider representing yours. That's a very accessible way for people to be involved in this pathway of donors here at the Albright. For $1,000, you can have a small plaque made on one of the library carrels in the level 2, basement level of the library. For $5,000, you can name a plaque to go into one of the upstairs carrels in the library in perpetuity. And if you have a spare $50,000, apart from me turning you upside down and shaking you as hard as I can, you can name one of the hostel rooms, which I think is a lovely thought. And they've got them for individuals, for loved ones of individuals, for the Tel Hesse excavation project. I think that's a wonderful thing that the people of the Hesse excavation project did together. And we'll put photographs of the excavations of Hesse in that particular room. These are some of the ways to give to this centennial campaign. There are many, many other ways, many other naming opportunities should you feel so moved. I would love to get to the 3.5 million by the end of this year. I would love to get significantly north of that by the time we do our centennial celebration in June next year. I'm inviting you to be part of that. I know many people in this room, many people on Zoom are already part of that, and I'm very, very grateful for that. So I'm coming to an end. What does all of this mean? So what? Why have we listened to me bang on about all of this? Well, the takeaway points are these. This has been a difficult year. It's been a difficult year for everyone. It's been a very difficult year for the Albright. But despite these adverse circumstances, we're here, we're open, we're doing what we do well. We're maintaining a strong, significant presence in Jerusalem's cultural landscape. I would like to think people would notice if we're gone. We're here promoting research excellence. And we continue to serve, and we do this with confidence and success, our mission to provide a hub for Israeli, for Palestinian, for American, for other international scholars in a shared pursuit of research excellence. That's what we're about. That's what we've been doing, and that's what we intend to continue to do for the next 100 years to come. Now, I said I'd end on one final letter, and I will. This is a letter, and this is one small part of it. It was a letter that was written by Albright to his mother in 1929. And it is a letter that Albright wrote to tell his mother that he had got engaged to who would become his wife, Ruth. Now remember, this is a man who, so legend has it, insisted his own children call him professor. This is why this archive is so important. Baltimore, May 18, 1919. Mother, dear mother, colon. He introduces and he says, in your letter, you seem to express surprise that I go to church. You know better than that. You know also that I never said women were uncongenial. By this time, you ought to know that I avoid them because of my extreme vulnerability in precisely that direction. Being poor and unattractive, I kept away in self-defense, knowing my weakness. As usual, misogyny was only the armor guarding a susceptible heart, which had passed through some bitter campaigns. I can make these admissions freely now. The acquaintance I mentioned has become an engagement. I did not break my vows. I avoided the girl until I was ashamed and then followed her guidance. Ruth is a wonderful woman whom I am very fortunate to get and whom I certainly do not deserve after so much sidestepping. She has brains, vivacity, good looks, and breeding, and not to mention a few other fine qualities. In short, she is a most adorable person. And she goes on a lot more about Ruth. He goes on to some other things, but he comes back to Ruth at the end of the letter as well. Where are we? Ruth is very idealistic, or she wouldn't have set her cap for me, as she puts it. She dissuaded me from thinking seriously of a possible opening as instructor temporarily in Romance languages. It doubtless would have been a mistake to begin to do hack work for a living, whereas by sticking to the last, it will be possible to accomplish something worthwhile. Love to all, William. And on that, I finish. Oh, no, I don't. Sorry. In addition to the photographs and in addition to the letters, Abigail donated something else from her family's archive. And that is the glasses of William Foxwell Albright. And he was as blind as a bat. Thank you.